right, so if you remember, a few years ago when we started working on the QEP, we created in departments and within majors these things. Do you remember these things? Okay, somebody in your department worked on this, or made somebody work on it. And, yeah, Fall 14.
Can I just throw out here, I do have those, if you don't remember where they are, or if you've changed chairs, or.
Yeah.
I do have those, and I told you the other day that I would send them to you, and I haven't, but I really do have it, and I actually can send it to you. It just didn't come today.
Because this is your starting point, and this is going to clarify everything. So let me just to refresh a bit. If you remember in fall of 14, or whenever it was, we had to put together in the abstract and in some land of future land, what we thought we would do during the experiential phase of the QEP. So QEP Project 1 is the freshman year. That's not what we're about today, except to give you that context. And in that freshman year, students were submitting some pieces to a portfolio. And that's why we got Pathbrite eventually. So this is not about that. That's there and in place. So we've got our freshman piece. That was Project 1. The foundational piece when students start reflecting upon the whole goal of the QEP, which is the vocation, their sense of vocation, calling, and core values. And there are some designated pieces that are put into a portfolio their freshman year to start building their portfolio and their assessment and our assessment of the QEP. So then we had in place the capstone piece, and Randy will talk about that in just a few minutes. That's at the end of their, we knew that was going to happen at the end of their Lee experience. Now, what was supposed to happen in the middle was something we all were asked to craft. Okay, so if we had the year 1 piece, and the final year piece, we'll call that year 4, but we know what that means. The final year piece, what happens in that experiential phase in between when they come in, trying to assess where they are in their thinking about vocation, where they are at the end, hopefully seeing growth through their Lee experience that we want to document in the QEP. And again, I love this QEP because it's what we're about anyway. We just never really assessed it, the core values and vocation. So the Project 2 piece turned out to be this, and Dr. Dirksen sent out actually a chart and said, all right, kind of fill this in. You start imagining where are your students going to go after their freshman year as they're in your program. So in years 2 and 3 of your program, where will you be able to assess? And here was the table. Creating experiential learning opportunities and integrative course syllabi that apply academic knowledge to the integration of faith and vocation through the practice of ethical action, redemptive service, and responsible citizenship in the church, community, and world. And here were the categories. Internship, practicum, applying academic knowledge. Service learning, how we might be applying academic knowledge to core values. There was another category, student research, applying academic knowledge to core values, and then an integrative syllabus using the New Think model. So we had these categories. I really feel like you don't remember those categories because actually I don't, and I worked on this. And you probably don't remember what was put into that chart because again, we were creating it before the QEP was ever approved, before SAC signed off on it. We had to document for them a plan of how we wanted students to think about the experiential phase, not just the first year or the last year, but that part in between. So we all made up a bunch of things, and I'll say that, and I'm holding in my hand the French version of this. So Jim Wilkins and I are reading this back and think, hey, that's good. No, that's a good idea. We'll do that. So this is what you turned in. To get something that looked like we thought might satisfy SACs, we said that almost everything would be submitted to an electronic portfolio. That was the easy way to talk about assessment. So we kind of just really glibly put that down and thought, well, we'll think about that later. So now as the committee has gotten back together, we thought, we don't want all that in the portfolio. That's just too much. As a matter of fact, for our institutional SACS assessment, they're going to look at the freshman year and the capstone year. But we really need, in our capstone year, for those students to be reflecting back over their journey. And that's why we do need some of these pieces in what will be the student's comprehensive portfolio. Now, in the interim, we'd all heard about portfolios and Pathbrite. So quite a few people jumped in on using Pathbrite last year. In your individual course, in your program. I've got a program in my department. This is great. We've wanted a portfolio for years. So they've started a portfolio within the department, within the program. That's great. A student may have 10 Pathbrite portfolios. But they will have, and that's what we're working on, and Bethany and Shannon are working on this for us. This is actually what we all thought at the beginning, but then it sort of got routed someplace else. But they're now going to help us get this coordinated with Pathbrite. We do not know today how that's going to happen, but they'll let us know that. But we need to get the big brush strokes today, and then we'll get the mechanics to follow. So each student will have a comprehensive portfolio. That's where their freshman piece is. That's where their capstone piece is going to be. But what we want to do now is to work on Project 2, to get these things that we turned in and see if we can identify the 4 critical points that we really do want to put in the portfolio. Now, maybe you do all of the things on here, great, but we don't want more than 4 pieces in that portfolio. And one of those reflections could be their cross-cultural experience, a reflection on that. You may determine that's a really good part of your program piece or not. It's totally up to you. But in those years between freshman and senior, where would be 4 points? Ideally, a couple come from year 2, at least one, because we don't want to look like it's just a junior year assessment. But, and it should be charting for the students even, not just for us, but for them. How did my thinking about and reflection about this deepen and grow through my years, now that I'm a senior in my capstone and looking back in this one comprehensive portfolio? So my challenge, as it is about everything, is let's make this meaningful for students. So try to pick 4 points. So looking back at French, I'll just take this as an example. I just printed out the whole thing and then went back and started highlighting what I thought might be the 4 areas. Now, some of these things we've looked back on and thought, well, that's not exactly what we're doing now. We actually made a course change. We're not doing. You can fix this. This is not in stone. So if you're thinking we've got a better plan, we've got 4 points we want to do that are going to be better than this, great, change it. This is in no way binding. I'm not making it up, am I?
Oh, no.
It sounded so certain. All right, so back to that. This is not binding. No, it really is not. And so work with it. Now here's my thing as I think about for my department. Actually, some of the things we're doing in this QEP assessment for each student are things I've wanted to assess in terms of my outcome goals for years and have not had measurements. I'm now getting one of my outcome goals that did not have hard data for, that was pertaining to can you articulate your understanding of worldview in terms of language and our core values. You know, I didn't use the term core values, but we've wanted to assess that for years. I'm wanting to double up on some of this. And so I think you should think about that. Think about your annual outcome goal assessment and see if there's not some piece here that can go both ways, that provides the students a nice piece to enter into their portfolio, but that helps you assess even things in your own department. So for instance, in French, one of the first courses after they finish intermediate, students in this course will interview and write stories of Francophone citizens in the region. The stories and written reflections on the experience and how they relate to core values will be submitted to each student's comprehensive electronic portfolio. I love that assignment. I'm glad for it. Now, I'm not sure if Dr. Wilkins is going to have that as a graded assignment in his class. I think he is by the magnitude of this. But what you put on here doesn't have to be a graded assignment. If it's just something you want to get them to reflect on, that's fine. But where will be 4 key points? Whether they're, and I know people have already created their syllabi, those are set. So don't add now a 10% reflection assignment that goes in. We can't add something to the syllabus. Goodness, things don't have to have a grade assigned to them. But you think through that or think ahead for next semester. The reason we need to meet today is because you might have an early point where you want a submission. I don't know what they're going to decide in English, but in English we have an Intro to English Studies course, which is their first course after 110. We may want to get something early on because, again, we're going to want to chart growth through years 2 and 3 in terms of the depth of their thinking and their ability to handle these terms, not just as vocabulary, but in practice. So these are documentation points of their experiences in years 2 and 3. So that's how I did mine. Now Randy's, you want to talk about how you approached it with your department, Randy? Because he's already done some preliminary work too.
Yeah, that handout that says QEP example implementation. This is something I use for my department. I always think of a William Faulkner title when I think of my department, sound and fury, signifying. Okay. So this is really helpful for simplifying, I think, right? Let's get this clear, right, and obvious what we want to do. And I think that's a way you can really approach it in your departments. We want to make it very meaningful, but keep it very manageable.
Exactly.
So this one page we went over this week as an example. It doesn't have to be exactly like this, but I use the humanities and classics disciplines. So project 1 is obviously first year. Right? Project 2 involves the departments. So the humanities and classics disciplines will do something like this ultimately. And again, it might look a little different than this. But I think of it as a couple courses that might be really sort of obvious. Every student in humanities takes methods. What a great class then to have a reflective assignment. Hopefully, it's not in place yet, we're working on it. Every humanities major will take a course called The Christian Mind. What a great place to reflect on vocation and values, of course. So those 2 courses right there are sort of ready-made for a nice summary reflection at the end or midway through the course. Right? Again, we don't have this in stone yet. This is what we're working on. So we could use those 2 courses as 2 pieces of the two of the 4. A third place we might find really a sort of quality level reflection activities that we do that almost every major does. Not every single major, but nearly every major would do one of these 2 things. Either participate in Classics Day, it's an annual event, or engage in our Faculty Fridays. This is where students meet with faculty once a month on Fridays to have coffee and food. And probably you're going to hit every student in one of those. Not necessarily every single one, but pretty close. So that gives us a third paper. And then the fourth, we thought of global perspectives. Most of our majors are going to go on one of these trips. So we kind of know which ones are, and then those who don't, we can track down outside the department if they take a different trip. But those are 4 little touch points that are easy, right, sort of obvious within the humanities and classics disciplines. For history, for example, we have a methods course similarly. And poli-sci has a methods course. That's going to be just an obvious, every methods course, every sophomore is basically taking it. So you've got it right there. I just build in an ungraded or maybe a participation grade, right? It's 5% of your grade to do it. But again, very, very simple. My faculty Wednesday said, well, what about all those other things that we proposed? If we figure out ways to work them in and it fits, great, right? It doesn't have to be just 4, but we want at least 4 for the sophomore, junior chronological tracking, right? And then in project 3, of course, they finish up with a summative essay. So that, again, we might not end up doing it exactly like this, but it's a good way to sort of proceed.
And Carol, I don't know if you want us to get some standard way to send in our 4 chosen areas to you. We can think about a template for that or something maybe to send out. That might be helpful for you for putting it together. So she'll get back to us on that. But again, this is not hard, but I think it's a way that our faculty sort of enjoy thinking about the program and moving students through the program in terms of growth of actually what we do care about. And another thing we need a supervisor, Dr. Dirksen has said, and we all agree, somebody in your department that's going to make sure that at the end of the year the appropriate pieces are in the portfolio or along the way. So that could be discipline coordinators or whomever else you wish to punish. No, I'm sorry, I mean, who still needs service points or, those are gone, yeah.
That was my question, is every faculty member going to keep track of essays that may be submitted, or
No,
is it the supervisor, or is it the capstone person who will coordinate? now, you're telling now, you're saying it's a different supervisor.
The chair, well, it'll be the coordinators or whomever the chair designates, and we've talked different ways about that, but there'll be somebody that needs to keep track of this, because we just can't get to senior year and find out, whoops.
They must be proficient.
This whole discipline area didn't get,
They must be
their-
proficient in Pathbrite.
yeah, and we're gonna have training on that, and they're really, we met with Bethany and with Shannon the other day. They're sharp, they're on the ball, and they're gonna get this to us in very clear ways, and we'll make sure. Yeah, the trick now, which is what we don't understand, I used Pathbrite in my class, and it was very intuitive, and I loved it. But now what we don't know is how to get something they did in my class into the comprehensive portfolio. How do we do that, and then how do we give access to whoever the designated supervisor, coordinator of the portfolios in each of your disciplinary? That's what we've got to work through. But that's not for today. Today, the big piece will be to get started on discussion with this, with our faculty, to see the areas that they want to identify as students move through the program. So again, so hopefully by September 15th, and again, we will think about maybe a template format of reporting this might be good, would be the 4 identified points or pieces along the path of this discipline area, and the name or names of the supervisor that you'll have overseeing each segment in the department. And that way they can start thinking about how many people will need access and that type of thing. Yes.
What is, I know with the gateway essays and the capstone essays, we talked about rating those for data points. Is there any plan to do any of that with these intermediate essays?
Would you like to address that?
Yeah, I think we've had confusion from the very beginning, because we are using Pathbrite to assess the QEP, and that's why we bought it. However, it's got a zillion other uses, and so we don't want it to be just used for that. We were kind of lucky to get such a nice Cadillac version of an e-portfolio for what we actually needed it for, so we really want to use it for other things. So, the QEP itself will be assessed by the method you were just saying. We do the freshman essays and we do the senior essays, and we compare them and see if there's growth. And if there isn't, then we go back to the drawing board. But what we want the student to have in hand, when the student goes into the capstone course, we want the student to have in hand this individual cumulative portfolio, which is their freshman essay, what they did in their 300 class, what, all the freshman essay material, plus the 4 points of light that you want them to put in there. So then they have this portfolio, and they can look at it, and then they see what their growth was when they're preparing to write their capstone paper. So they write their capstone paper, which is a reflection of where have you come from and where are you going, and so they can see that path, the things that they thought when they were freshmen and how that developed over time.
I have a question about how we actually go into this, because I can think of courses in my discipline as I'm trying to figure out these things, where differential equations, I could have a freshman, perfectly on path, sophomore, junior, senior, and a senior who has already had the capstone experience.
Do you have any courses for which that's not true?
Not
really.
Because they can go come in so advanced mathematics, they can, depending on their choices, take some of these things when they're freshmen.
Well, I think as long as you identify 4 places
Right.
in the curriculum.
I'm just saying it can be
Whatever.
hard
Yeah.
to see growth when you've got a class that's got freshmen and seniors.
Well, they don't have to see growth between your differential equations
just
class
person.
and the
Right.
freshman
Person,
class.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
So that's gonna be this parts 2 and 4, or part 2 here could be when you were a senior or when you were a freshman.
yeah, if you wanna pick out 4 places where you think they could put some meaningful input, and one of them's writing this essay as a freshman, and one of them's writing it as a senior, and the next one's writing it,
And
the
so
next
it's
one.
not gonna be tied to a specific part of the QEP, it's gonna be tied to when they wrote it.
It's
Where
for-
they
it's-
were.
That middle
Where they
part is
were.
really for
Okay.
them,
Okay.
and so if they're in there for 2 years, there should be some growth, whatever order
Sure.
it comes in for them.
And again, this may not be looked at, we understand, by a SACS committee, however, should they decide to, we will have something, because we made a big deal out of this. And so we will have it if they want to, but the main thing will be that we've had something that, in the capstone years, the students have been able to look back over and to read what they wrote at various points. And again, I do encourage you, I mean, it makes all kinds of sense in our department, but for trips, you know, the reflections on those trips, not just to say, I like the food here, but you know, a real reflection. And to say what it meant in terms of thinking about core values and the contrast between cultures and what they learned, and a good essay there, that's important. And they forget it, sometimes if they've done a trip early, I know in my capstone, they've forgotten how fresh that was, and so that's why a piece in the portfolio is gonna be good for them to read again.
I think, echoing some of this, there's a lot of things in our QEPs that we wanted to double up and put in our
Yes.
normal assessments. So we're gonna have a lot of the pieces already assessed because we're doing it for
Yes,
two.
yes,
And so,
Yes.
it's not gonna be as laborious because we're getting
yes,
two things done at the same time. And we're looking at things that are very important to us.
exactly,
And so,
yeah.
And really, again, what you do with this part, the freshman part and the senior part,
Mhm.
that's what we use to evaluate the QEP. We want this in there for the students' benefit, but what you do with it is up to you.
I wanna make sure that at the sophomore, there's something happening, and at the junior, there's something
Exactly,
happening. So that
yeah.
by the time we get to the senior,
Exactly.
the first senior of reflection, we don't, they're
I
not
think it'll
surprised. we
give you
don't.
wonderful information.
It's gonna give us, yeah.
And when we, there are ways that you can tie the essay to the goal for the course or to the
Mhm.
department goal, and that pulls it together for your assessment. So while I'm not saying you have to use it for this specific purpose, I want it there so the students can see their own development before they write their senior paper. But
Yeah, that's
you're
what
gonna have way more information than you've ever had about your own, the success of your own programs in reaching your own program goals, because it'll all be there.
Gives them something to reflect upon
Yes,
Exactly.
exactly.
and in their own development.
All right.
Yeah, there are other institutions like the Global Perspective Office already collecting data and to do essay. Is there any way that we can tap on those?
The way you can tap in it is get the student to turn it in for you.
Mhm.
If they write the essay for Richard, or they write the essay for their trip director, then you ask them to turn it in for you as well. You might wanna give them some prompts
Yeah.
for how they turn it in for you, because you're gonna wanna make it a little more specific. I mean, a lot of departments have their own trips, and so, you know, Paul is gonna have students write the reflection on their trip a certain way because he's their trip director, and he knows what the goal of the trip was for the major. But if they're just out there taking somebody else's trip, you might wanna tailor the response that they put in your portfolio.
Don't
That
worry.
makes sense.
They love to submit the same thing twice. They'll
Well,
be
they
all for
do,
that.
they do. So basically, what we want you to do is figure out where are those 4 points? And if they're consecutive, you know, 2 from the sophomore year, 2 from the junior year, because your courses are sequenced that way, that's great. But we want you to figure out 4 places where students can make meaningful reflection on something that you're doing in your curriculum. Trips, service, intro course, you know, however they're developing through that.
What is it?
Programmatically, what's between the freshman and the capstone, you know, what's that big chunk in there where they're getting a lot of their experiences?
When would you like this? When will it be?
September 15th.
September 15th.
Which gives you considerably more time than you had to write the whole project.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah, right?
And this is still, September 15th is still your projection, and I think
Yeah.
it's gonna work this way.
So I'm just trying to think about the data points or the class, specifically. So the freshman 2016 class is the first one that's gonna be evaluated all the way through.
Right,
Is that correct?
that's right.
Okay.
That's why, and that's why we're having this meeting today, is because this does actually begin this fall. This is the fall we need submissions in, so that's why we need this determined by the 15th, in case you've got something this semester rather than spring semester. This is the first year that we need project 2 entries.
I see. Okay.
And I would hope at least one comes in this year from each program would be nice, I think, not leaving all 4.
And back to my simplified form, I'm fairly certain we'll have more than just 4 opportunities to catch that student who might be transferring in, right, or taking something because they're advanced. So several places maybe to catch those people.
Artie?
How about assessing those essays? Are we gonna be assessing those essays as well, or?
You mean the 4?
Yeah.
That is entirely up to the department. The QEP won't be assessing the individual essays. For us, they're information for the students so that they can write a meaningful reflection in their capstone. However, I think it's rich data for the departments. I think it would be a shame if we have this big apparatus and you didn't use it for something, but that's separate from the QEP.
But I love it because we've never had a mechanism for trapping that much good data that addresses some of the outcomes, so I think it's a rich
I've
source.
also made arguments within my department, we can collect a lot of data and we can sample.
Yeah,
And
oh
that
yeah.
you do not
Right,
have to
that's
evaluate
correct,
every
too.
single.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
we do.
Yeah,
you
We
collect
have
a lot.
sample.
Mhm.
Yeah, you can develop your rubric and
Yeah.
write your essays, but, you know, on the sampling. It's exciting.
Thank you. At 3:27.
4 points and a person.
4 points, that's,
person.
oh, that's nice.
And by the
4
15th.
points and a person.
Is there a rubric that was developed for the freshman gateway essay?
Yes, and we have one for the capstone, because we've been doing this for several years to evaluate the general ed core as part of the core evaluation. So we do have a rubric for the freshmen and for the capstone.
And Randy's gonna talk a little bit about
Yeah, just a
the
quick,
capstone.
some updates on the capstone on this. Are you ready to move to part 3? Thinking this shouldn't take long, but really what we need to just be updated on is the fact that, as your sheet there says, we've made these recommendations and they're being implemented. Disciplines that didn't have a capstone, capstones have been and are being created so that they're all in place by the time this freshman cohort reaches their senior year. But the main thing that had to be done is the creation, number 4 there, of one standard capstone assessment activity for the purposes of the QEP. So whatever else you do in capstone, right, however you run your capstone, whatever you emphasize, vocation and the core values need to be at least a piece of that. And we need one standard activity that assesses this. So an essay that captures kind of a summary of this. So the second page of that, this is the most recent revised version of this essay. It's big, right, in terms of a lot of words there for them to read before they start writing. But we wanted to lay it all out. And we got a committee worked on this, and capstone teachers contributed suggestions on how we go about this. So it's a little unwieldy, but I think it's okay. I think it gets at every point we want them to think about, right? So it's a lot of stuff there, but it really gives them a chance to say everything connected to this, right? Reflect on your understanding of the relationship between faith and vocation. Lee's core values, right? How have these core values? So the how have your academic experiences impacted? And then lastly, how will your understanding impact your approach after college? So it gets them through all of these perspectives we wanted them to think about. So we're thinking a 4 to 5 page essays. Some of the capstones have already been doing this, but this fall we want any fall capstones to implement, and then spring, if we want to tweak this at all, then spring we tweak it, and everybody does it in spring. We have a really good first attempt, even though our fall 16 freshmen aren't there yet. By spring 18, we will have a nice full sample of capstone essays, and we'll kind of know how they're doing.